Welcome to the Danish Board of District Heating's podcast series, where we cover different aspects of our industry. I personally have for a long time noticed that our industry is not very diverse. Too many in our industry are very much similar to somebody like myself, not very young, male, a bit grey maybe even. To look into this, I have invited Charlotte Owen from the Danish Embassy in the UK to discuss diversity, and she has invited a few experts as well. So, I'm still Morten Jordt Duedahl from the Danish Board of District Heating, but today your host will be Charlotte. Please, Charlotte, take it away.
Thank you, Morten, and hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Charlotte Owen. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Principal Energy Policy Advisor at the Danish Embassy in London. So I'm taking over this podcast today from your usual host, Morten, to talk about the very important topic of gender diversity in the heat network sector. Have you ever walked into a room at a heat networks event and realized that you're the only woman in the room? Do you ever think about what implications the lack of women in the sector might have for our customers and people in the real world? Have you ever wandered around an energy centre wearing PPE that's far too big for you? Well, you're definitely not alone. We're going to explore these topics here today, and perhaps listening will help you tackle that imposter syndrome we sometimes all feel creeping in, or help you have a discussion about gender diversity in your workplace. Everyone, regardless of gender, is encouraged to listen along. I have two fantastic guests here with me today. Rachael, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Charlotte, and hello, everyone. My name is Rachael Mills. I do a lot of stakeholder engagement in the built environment in sustainability through my company SE2. And for the last 6 or 7 years, that's focused on heat networks. I've worked at a housing association in the UK where I was responsible for their heat networks. And since then, I've been delivering heat network consultancy for the social housing sector. But in 2019, I also co-founded a group called the District Heating Divas, which is an informal business network for women working in heat networks across all walks of life. So engineers, designers, marketing people, lawyers, financiers, everyone, from people who are just starting their career to those who are very senior, might be vice presidents, board directors, things like that. And it's an opportunity for everybody to leave their sort of job titles at the door and to just join and share experiences as women. Since 2019, obviously, we went through the pandemic where the Divas became a real lifeboat for a lot of people, I think. We've got about 350 members, 6 regional groups who meet on a fairly regular basis. We've had 3 national conferences, a mentoring programme, and we're trying to promote careers in the sector as well. And all of that is done pro bono. It's a really inspiring and joyful place to be, and it's one of the best things in my job at the moment. So I'm delighted to have been invited, and I'm looking forward to today's discussion.
Thank you, Rachael. I'm so glad you can join us here today. I'm a member of the Divas, to everyone who's listening, and I can tell you it is a fantastic group. It's open to women and anyone whose identity includes womanhood, so you should definitely consider signing up. It is so much fun. One of the best conferences I've ever been to was the Divas conference. Anyway, Kamma, would you like to please introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you so much, Charlotte. And it sounds so interesting that I'm so embarrassed that I'm not a diva yet, but I can hope to be in the future. But for now, I'm the Manager Director of CTR, which is responsible of operating and developing the heat transmission system in the metropole of Copenhagen, Denmark. So. And I have worked with district heating for more than 20 years, so in that way, I'm an expert.
Fantastic. So before we begin, I just want to acknowledge that we can only speak from our own experiences. So I am an intersectional feminist, which means that I recognize that women from different backgrounds and with different identities experience oppression, discrimination, and prejudice in different ways. I also wanted to acknowledge that gender is a spectrum and that people who are non-binary may also experience inequity in the workplace in other ways. So with that noted, I wanted to begin by posing a statistic to both of you, Kamma and Rachael. So in Denmark, around 70% of district heating organizations' boards have no women on them. How does that make you feel?
Well, it makes me feel slightly disappointed, to be honest. And I feel like all of those Danish companies are missing a huge opportunity to have, diverse and in slightly different thinking on those boards. And I think if you get the same of all sorts of people, regardless how they're all the same, there's a risk of sort of groupthink. And I think by not having the right diversity, it's just a massive missed opportunity.
I totally agree, and a serious number of studies have also shown that diversity in broad terms will make your financial a better company. And it's also a bit disappointing with another angle, because in Denmark actually we have a quite an equal society between men and women, and most of the women are working, so it's not due to women not being on the field. That's not why these numbers come forth. I actually saw it was a bit older statistic that the numbers when you only have the boardroom, it's about 4% of all in the energy sector in broad terms. So it's quite bad.
Yeah, I suppose one of the challenges is that once you get to those kind of higher echelons of organizations where you are looking at senior leadership on the board, even if you have sort of relatively equal numbers of women joining the sector, the structure is just not designed to support women to get further up within organizations to see those promotions through. It is a very sort of institutionalized systemic issue, and I think those numbers do reflect that.
You see the same in other business, of course, but and I will say we have seen an increase in women in the district heating sector. When I started 20 years ago, I surely was the only woman into the room, but that's not the fact today. It's better, but still there's a long way to go.
Yeah, most definitely. So I did some research just in preparation for this podcast, and I found that over 80% of single parents in the UK are women. And according to the New Economics Foundation, single parents are seeing their bills rise 56% faster than the average household. And of course, currently both in Denmark and the UK, we are feeling the effects of the current energy security situation and that rising price of energy. And it did make me think, how might gender perspectives actually shape this discussion about how we manage that rising cost of living?
I think it's interesting because, with the single parent statistic you just shared, but traditionally as well, and this is generalizations, but, women tend to be in caring roles. So they tend to be the ones who take parental leave for new babies. They're also ones who tend to care for elder relatives and just in the community more, doing more caring roles, which tends to mean that they're at home more. They also have longer life expectancy. So, you're going to be more likely to be a older woman than an older man on general. So I think they are directly impacted more by those rising prices because they're at home more. I think it was interesting through the pandemic when we were all at home more. So it would be interesting, I'm waiting for all this research to come out, looking back over how, energy usage changed over the 2 years when we were all at home. But now we're back in the workplace on the whole, although obviously more hybrid working, which is great. I think the other quite interesting thing, I was involved in a conference last year about fuel poverty more generally, and there was a session on that about gender and energy poverty. And the point that they made was that in traditional families, and even really ones where there's a lot of equality, including mine, I would say, it's the husband that makes the really big investment decisions about the car that we're going to buy and things like that, and it's the women that make the smaller everyday decisions about which shop are we going to buy groceries at, or should and juggling the daily domestic budget. So I think that impacts on women in those ways as well. I also think on the broader fuel poverty, I know some housing associations are thinking about how they can support their customers who are going to be in deep need, and it's a problem, not just for heat networks, but generally, I think, with the rising prices. And people are looking at quite, extreme measures like opening community centres, so people have somewhere warm to go in the evenings where they can have a hot shower, or children can do their homework. So I think it's going to have a massive impact. And I think because women are in those caring roles, it will be up to them. It will fall on their shoulders more than it will for men. Not to say that men aren't extremely worried. I think, on the flip side, it's traditionally men who are out breadwinning. I know, this isn't always the case, but, so there's more pressure on men to bring home the money to pay for the energy bills. And I think, equality in its purest sense means that everybody needs to do more sharing of all the things. So we need to have more sharing of the caring roles and more sharing of the income generation.
I very much agree, and I have been wondering what does this difference means when you go to the boardroom? Because when we don't have women represented in the boardroom, then how will the companies take the right decision due to what you just described? Because those are our customers, and how will they react in this situation? And if you only actually have one side of the customers representative in the board, then you could fear that they wouldn't see in time to react in the right way. For instance, due to the prices, how the prices will be structured for the next coming years. It could have an influence that people wouldn't be able to buy the bills because too late they acknowledge that the families have this serious situation. And another thing, what kind of safements do you do in the families? What kind of change do you have to do? You could fear that if it's the men who take the decision of the investment, but the woman who actually sees and control the daily bill will you then take the right decision in the end of what is the wise thing to do? For instance, savings in the energy area is not very visible in the household and could be, in a way, a bit boring to invest in. But I do believe that in the situation we are right now with these huge price rising numbers, I think all households will have a stiff view at the energy costs. But we need to somehow use the situation to get some benefit on the long terms.
I think, fundamentally, the more research that I have done preparing for this podcast, I think the more you start to realize that energy is a very inherently gendered topic and a very inherently gendered issue. I think something I always struggle with as somebody who is a big promoter of gender equality is that you do have to actually look at the sector in terms of the way that society is now. I think ideally we all want to see women and men and everyone on an equal playing field and able to access boardrooms to make decisions and a fair split of household chores and domestic responsibilities. But the reality is that's not the situation right now. And as a result, it does mean you need to think really clearly about how do women and people that don't identify as men experience the current energy situation differently. And I think that I do wonder, if we did have more women on boards, as you say, Kamma, would we have reached a different situation than the one we're in now?
That's a huge question, because the main reason of the situation is the war in Ukraine. And so it would take a restructure for the whole world to answer your questions. But I do believe we would be in a different situation. But it's also it's such a difficult question, because if you believe that diversity means anything, I believe that you have to acknowledge that we are different in persons. Because if we're not different in persons, then why should diversity mean anything at all? Then we would just look different. And by saying we are different, then in what way are we different? Because then we are going to those boxes. I felt that Rachael was a bit afraid to put us in, and I'm very much afraid of that too, because it's so difficult to generalize on sex, because we all have something of the other box, and some is culture, some is nature, and which is what. But if we put all that aside, I think it's easier to say, yes, women and now I have to speak for myself as this woman I am, but this woman I am are different from men in different ways, and that's why I think it will make a difference if women and men are together instead of only women and only men, because it's the same the other way around, that if you have a board or a company where primarily about women, you will have the lack of the man point of view. So but it's a difficult discussion, yeah.
I totally agree. I was going to make the same point, that equally we don't want all women boards either. We want diversity. Yeah. And your point is right, that my experience is different from the other two women on this podcast. No, not all women are the same. We're not homogenous. It's just like not all men are the same, and we're not also not saying that men are some sort of mythical evil thing. They are good people, but we want diversity in its roundest form. And obviously today, as Charlotte said at the top, we're talking about gender diversity, but there's a whole range of other, diverse experiences as well. And in the broadest sense, we need to encapsulate all of those.
Yeah. And I think it's because whatever decision you're going to make, it's always good, to have different point of views, and we have no doubt about different point of knowing, like law and financial and things. We cover that every time we make a decision. But the thing that your personal experience make affect the decision you are making, I think that's the one we need to acknowledge more than we do today. We aren't machines. We are what we come with an experience and so on. And that's why the best decisions are made if you have a lot of experience around the table.
I'm hearing that boards and sort of key decision makers is a really big theme here for the question of gender diversity in the sector. And I think a key problem is that although grassroots change can do a lot, and we should all definitely think about how we can get involved, change does also happen from the top down. And I think the thing is that those currently vested with power tend to look a lot more like Morten than they look like me. And if I think about how I'm going to convince a board or an MP to change something, it does often come back to that: what financial impact is this having in the real world? And I found that research from the McKinsey Global Institute found that if women were to participate in the economy identically to men, that could add as much as $28 trillion or 26% to the annual global GDP. And I think representation in the sector in Denmark and in the UK, so in the heat network sector, is improving for sure, but it's definitely not representative. And I wonder, what implications do you think this actually has for our customers out in the real world?
When we set up the Divas, so it was this harebrained scheme, we thought we might find 50 women working in heat networks. We just thought it would be really small. And as I said, we've got, close, we're nearly at 400, which is so exciting. And so I think the women are there. And I think in the UK, and I mean, heat networks have been around a long time in some form, but it's really had a massive kickstart in the last sort of 5 to 10 years. So in its sort of flourishing state, it is a relatively new industry with the regulations that are coming. There's loads of government investment. So I think it is becoming a more attractive sector. And I think that is bringing in more talent from all different sorts, including women. And I think that will take time for those women to work upwards and from bottom up, and also to be drawn up from the top as well. And I think you sort of have to do that with purpose as well. I think I'm slightly not exactly answering your question, but I think with the point you made about, senior leadership, and the men making the opportunities for women and all of those things, whatever you're doing when it comes to making a thing that you are doing diverse, you have to do it with purpose. You can't just expect that it will automatically happen. So you have to consciously make that thing happen. And I think there are most of the men I know want the workforce to be more diverse as well. And they are actively, they are our advocates and allies in this. And I think, it takes all of us to make this thing happen. But you have to do it. I was organising a conference recently, and we did a speaker briefing call. And one of the speakers, the first thing he said was, we have a policy only to speak on diverse panels. And if this panel is not diverse, I'm going to have to step down. So that felt like real leadership, so, this is what we stand for, and this is how I'm going to make this happen. And I think it will take all of us to act with purpose.
I do believe if your research from McKinsey is correct, then actually we could save a lot of money in the industry if we were better to diverse our decisions makers. And I believe they're right, because of what I said before, your decision will attend to foresee more things that can affect your decision if you have a broader experience found to stand the decision on, to make the decision.
That same McKinsey research, which I think we've all read, it actually says one of the reasons for that growth as well in the marketplace, especially they were talking about diversity in the workplace, is that if you have a diverse workforce, you will attract more diversity because people can see themselves. And when it comes to the leadership role and board, if people can see that's what you're doing, the best talent will want to join your company. And so you will have better people making better decisions and showing better leadership. And it's this amazing virtuous circle. So it's sort of like if you build it, they will come a little bit as well. So as well as having diversity of thinking, you will also externally, people will see that and they will want to join you. And so it gets better and better.
And the weird thing is, because this research is a couple of years old, why haven't we seen a big race of companies wanting to do exactly what you just told us about, Rachael, showing very expressive that you take a stand on this issue?
There's an organisation in the UK called Powerful Women, and it acts across the whole of the energy sector, and it's trying to increase the number of women, or the proportion of women in middle management and senior leadership and board level in all energy sectors. So that's oil and gas, nuclear, across the whole piece, and it's working. And one of the things that, like you said, Kamma, you've got to measure it and report on it and hold people to account on it. And they have seen a change, and their statistics, they update their statistics every year. So I'd recommend finding those as well, having a look at that and seeing how that's changing and what can we learn as the Heat Network from that and replicate within our sector.
I think something that is really important around gender is the way that people experience communication differently, and the way that men like to be communicated with compared to women can be hugely different. And of course, that's not always true, but generally there is evidence that shows that men and women respond differently to different methods of communication. And for us now in the heat network sector, particularly in the UK, where we still have a relatively nascent sector that is, about to hopefully explode into the energy world and get to a point where a fifth of our heat is delivered through heat networks. We're going to have to do a lot of consumer engagement over the next decade, at least. Engagement with communities to help them understand what heat networks are, engagement with local authorities to help them understand the roles that they will play in being stewards for the heat network sector and identifying where the most appropriate places are for heat networks to come forward, engagement with our politicians, our MPs. And I think it is really important that we do consider how gender might affect the way that we want to communicate. And it's not just the ways as well. It's also, it's the times that you try and communicate. It's the language that you're using. It's the actual method that you're using as well. And I think there is a big focus at the moment where government is regularly asking the sector, what are you doing to reach out to your customer base or to people in your local area where you might be delivering a heat network? How are you bringing people with you on this journey to net zero? And I think if we don't consider gender as part of that, we risk not bringing people with us. We risk leaving people behind, or we risk that a section of our society won't support the heat networks industry.
I very much agree. It's so important these coming times that we have the people very close, actually. For all time, heat network had been so dependent on the customers' trust, because we connect and they so to speak can't get rid of us that easy. So we really need them to feel both included and to feel that we understand them and that their needs are actually very serious for us. And I do believe, as I think it was you said earlier, that the thing to recognize oneself in the other part is very, very important. And that's why we need to be diverse. We need to have men look as being a mirror for other men, but we also need to have women being a mirror for other women. Definitely. Yeah.
I think you're right. I mean, the communication piece, especially in the UK, is going to be massive given the growth. So at the moment,
it's the about, same. Yeah.
2% of heat your domestic heat comes from heat networks at the moment, and that's going to grow to 20%. So most people don't even know what a heat network is in the UK. It's pretty niche, although me and Charlotte know loads about it. We're very passionate about it. But so there is this massive step up that needs to happen in awareness, what it involves, the pros and cons, and I think it is good business sense to be able to talk to the widest range of your customers, and it's what the big brands do really, really well. And all that thing about trust and explaining and transparency and clarity and all of those things, and we can learn from other sectors in that as well. And the point that we keep on making is there are many different experiences, and you've got to find lots of different ways to reach out to people. I mean, trusted third parties, on the fuel poverty work I was doing, 20 years ago, we worked a lot with trusted third parties, faith groups, groups where there's places where there's a lot of immigration, and so they've got sort of different community groups. And there's all these different ways that people connect, and we need to reach out to all of those and just think, where do people see things? And as Charlotte said, what language do they use? What questions will they have? And making it as transparent and as easy to understand as possible. I think that's the other thing. As sort of engineers, we're putting a lot of detail into explaining what a heat network is, but all somebody wants to know is am I going to be warm? Will there be hot water? And how much will it cost me? And how reliable is it? So, it is about speaking the language of the people who need to listen.
Couldn't say it better.
I think a thread I'm picking up again through this conversation is this idea of representation, or, as you kind of put it, Kamma, sort of, holding up a mirror and seeing yourself. And do you think that seeing other women in the workplace changes how you personally participate and learn and develop at work?
I definitely think so. I, so to speak, use myself as a role model. So if I got the opportunity to have a speak or something, I will take it also because I'm a woman, because I think I have a duty, so to speak, to be a part of the district heating sector. And to be a visible kind.
Absolutely, massively. For me, purposely, 100%, it makes a difference seeing other women in the workplace, and again, through the Divas, that's kind of why we did it, because I couldn't see the women. I knew a small group of women, and now there's this massive group of women, and all the feedback we get is they. Women who are part of it love knowing there are other women who are doing similar jobs, having similar problems, and whether that's really not an engineer, so they can talk technical stuff, and communicators can talk, and it's a real especially for the people who are new in their career, early in their career, they just find it hugely supportive and inspiring a little bit as well, I think, to see all these other women that they can talk to on a one-to-one basis. I mean, it's a very open and egalitarian sort of network in a way, and it also means you then got, in an old-fashioned business network thing, somebody, and then you can pick the phone up to them and ask. And I think there's been lots of, for me, I find working with women a really collaborative experience. Not all women are collaborative, like we've said, because not all women are the same. So, generalizations, but I find it collaborative. I think we have a shared experience, as I said before, especially through COVID, when everyone was going, how do I do homeschooling? How do I do this? Oh my goodness, and all of that stuff. It became a massive support group as well. And I think even when there's not an official mentoring program, which are also really beneficial. But I think just having other people with similar experiences to you who you can go and have conversations with in a sort of informal mentoring or coaching role is really important as well. So for me personally, I love working with a real mix of people, but I especially love working with women.
And I do hope, I don't know, but if we take another sector like the caring sector, where typical primarily it's women, I hope those men who are starting up in kindergartens or something, they find a network like.
Sure.
Then I don't know what the opposite of diva is. Something like that, or nursery or something, because they will have the same need. They will be surrounded by women all day, and I could imagine they would have the same need to meet up with other men who find this job very interesting and to be a role model in this area. And so it's not that mysterious that you need to come together with someone more like yourself and to exchange experience.
Definitely. I think for me, one of the reasons why I love the Divas is because it makes me feel sort of normal, inverted commas,
Yes.
or like it's sort of natural for me to be there. Like it's a very normal thing for me to be a woman in the sector. And I think it makes me realize that when I do walk into that room and I am the only woman, that there's something wrong with the room and not something wrong with me.
Yeah, and perhaps you get a bit more relaxed and can ask more questions, so you don't feel this is a stupid question. It's not probably because I'm not the right one. You get a safe space where you, in a way, can speak out, and then you can speak out in the other rooms as well, because you get the comfort from the other women as well. They are behind you, even though they are not there physical.
So I think we're sort of coming towards the end of our time on our podcast. So I'll just ask one final question. How do you think we could encourage more women into the sector?
It's a very good question, and it's a difficult question to ask. I do believe what we just talked about, being a role model, is an issue, and we need to be that also on the universities and other places with young people to make them interested in our sector at all, and the women especially. I think Rachel's initiative with the Divas is an extremely good example of doing something actively. So I will take that with me and go to my association. I actually tried to start a similar group up there, but in Denmark, I think there's a little fear of, are we doing something special for women because we want to be like, we are not special, we are one of the boys, and if we are having a special group, what's that all about? So actually it was difficult. I didn't get a huge among of women connecting, but I try again.
We should pick this up, Kamma, afterwards. Let's have the Danish Divas. I think that would be great. Let's go international.
Yes, I'm in.
I think, Charlotte, recruiting women into any sector, like I said before, has to be done with purpose, and you have to put the adverts places where women will see. And I think as well, because Heat Networks in the UK is relatively small, as I said before, people, men or women, don't realise it could be a career choice rather than something you find yourself in. So I think, and we need, the growth that we're going to go through in the UK and Heat Networks is going to need a lot more talent of all sorts. So I think there is a massive opportunity for us to promote ourselves, as Kamma said, at universities and just general. I think if there's general awareness raising of what a heat network is, more talent will come in. We've done our small bit on the Divas on our website. We've made a short video. It's about 2 minutes about people sharing their experiences of their career in a heat network in an attempt, like a promo video really for Heat Network. So that's available, and it's got a really diverse sort of lineup of people sharing their experiences from different bits of the sector as well. And we've also started advertising Heat Network jobs on the website as well, which is totally free. Anybody can post a job. So in a small way, trying to find a place where people can come and find out what a career in Heat Networks looks like. And so we can again do that and make it diverse and strong and talented and wonderful, so we can grow the sector.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Kamma and Rachel, for joining us here today to talk about the very important topic of diversity and gender in the heat network sector. You should definitely all sign up to the District Heating Divas if you have not already. We do have some international members who are part of the District Heating Divas who join online or come across for some of the conferences. So definitely do sign up. Do sign up as well to DBDH's Hot Cool magazine. Rachel's written an article in there recently. I've written an article in there recently. I'm sure Kamma must have as well. It's a fantastic magazine, so please do give that a read. I also just wanted to flag that there is also an organisation called Diverse Heat Network, which has been set up by Vattenfall. It's a group that's looking to promote diversity in the heat network sector as well, with a particular focus on having a range of ethnicities involved in the sector. So do have a look into that group as well. And with that, I will wrap up and let you know that next time you will have Morten back as your usual host. So thank you, everyone. I've been Charlotte Owen, and look forward to the next time.